I'm Ben Gregory,
And I'm Cassie Zimmer.
and we have been dating for...
6 months today.
I brought you a chocolate!
Aw, thanks, Ben. I'll eat that later. Oh, shoot, I just threw it.
You don't like my chocolate?
No, I love it. It's beautiful.
Oh,
It's nice and squished and warm.
So dating's discerning if you should marry the person. So that should be the aim of when you're dating someone, is asking the question, well, is God calling me to marry Cassie? And Cassie would be asking the question, is God calling me to marry Ben?
Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
Unfortunately, sometimes dating is not taken within that context of, should I marry this person? And that doesn't lead to our happiness. So we're here to talk about some ways in which we've been dating each other and like pursuing that question of, are we called to marry each other?
So, Ben, what's so beautiful about marriage?
Marriage. Like people don't think it's beautiful? Like they think it's boring or something like that?
Yeah, and like more and more in today's world, like less people are getting married.
Why would they do that? Well, there's a lot of beauty into it. Let's look into some of the beauty of marriage.
Transition music.
So marriage is really beautiful because it reflects the love of the Holy Trinity. In the Holy Trinity, you have God the Father, and He loves completely God the Son. And the Son, Jesus, gives Himself completely to God the Father. And out of that love, it's so intense that the love itself is a third person of the Trinity. That's the Holy Spirit, the love between Father and Son. In a marriage, you have the husband who gives himself completely to his wife, who gives herself completely to the husband. And out of that love, it's so intense that it actually creates new life. It creates a new and equal member of the family, a child. So this is the beauty of marriage. Now that you've got to know a little bit about what marriage is and what dating is and what vocations are, we can tell you a little bit of our personal experience getting to know each other.
So before I met Ben, I guess during this point in my life, I was really trying to get closer to God, and everything else in my life that I had prioritized, like getting a boyfriend and grades and social life. I was trying really hard to put God above all those and let God be first. And so I tried doing holy half hours every day and going to mass.
I was also praying, and we happened to have the same prayer time, and I happened to start noticing Cassie, and like, wow, she's really pretty. She seems like a nice person. And the thought just kept coming up in my mind. And that's an example of we were both praying, and God led us to each other through our prayer. Then I talked to her. I got to know her a little bit, because you're going to want to make sure, if you're going to ask somebody on a date, that your personalities are compatible, and that you could be friends with that person. And once I was ready, what did I do?
You asked me out on a date. Use the word date, fellas. Use the word date.
Guys, it can be really scary, because you can get rejected. But if you get rejected, you wouldn't want to date that person anyway, right? And this is where communication is super, super important in a relationship. When you ask somebody on a date, that doesn't mean that you're boyfriend, girlfriend. And you should clarify that. And then at the end of the first date, it's really important to say, hey, would you like to go on a second date with me? If you don't ask that, then you can both be wondering how the date went or not really know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the date went well. He didn't ask me out again. I thought it went well.
So with the date, he prayed first, which was very, very good. He kept conversation going. He made eye contact. He knew ahead of time before he asked me out where he was going to ask me on the date. Casey Bonkers, which has lots of board games and coffee.
You don't want to take someone on a first date to this big fancy restaurant that's overwhelming. A really good like coffee shop or like ice cream store or somewhere where you can
Walk
just
around
meet,
the park.
yeah, have a snack, go for a walk, and like get to talk to each other.
So after like 2, 3, 4 dates, we decided that, yeah, we actually want to pursue dating with each other. There are 4 pillars that need to be upheld, and they need to be even. The 4 pillars to base your relationship on are physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. Or, as the acronym, PIES.
The first pillar we're going to talk about is physical. Physical touch is one of the 5 love languages. So touch is incredibly important. And sometimes they're like, oh, they're Christians, so they can't touch each other at all. And that's simply not true. But you can also misuse it. So there are a couple of different kinds of love. What we're going for is the Greeks called agape, and that is a self-gift. I'm giving myself to you, you're giving myself to me. But there are other kinds of love that are also present in romantic love. God didn't create them as problems. They're supposed to be there. And one is eros, and that's emotional love. That's the feeling of oh, I'm so in love with you. That's all the butterflies. There's another kind of love, and this love is affection. And affection is more like what you might show somebody you care about. So how do you show eros? In an appropriate way during dating? You show it by affection. Ways of being affectionate are ways that are very purposeful, and ways that are that the other person knows makes them feel loved. Cassie, how can I hug you so that you feel loved through my touch?
So I love his hugs because he's really tall and I'm really short. Hi.
Hello.
I love just kind of hugging him, and my head's buried in his chest and I can feel his heartbeat. And I just feel really safe.
Aww.
So if I want to hug Cassie, I can do it that way because it's a gift of myself toward her. And I know she really feels loved when I do that. So with touch, you should never force someone to do something they don't feel comfortable with. But you should always try to be giving to the other person in an affectionate way.
Mm-hmm. So the second pillar is intellectual. And intellectual is kind of you're learning things together, or you're exploring information with each other. It's kind of like a friendship thing. You and your friend will talk about how much you love 21 Pilots. Be able to relate information with each other, because sometimes relationships can get too heavy on the emotional and physical side. But when they actually want to talk about anything other than each other, then they didn't have anything else to talk about.
So here's an example of how Cassie and I helped our relationship through the intellectual pillar. There were times when Cassie was trying to get me to do something, but I seemed like I was off in another world. I was spaced out, and she was frustrated at that. And there are other times that I was talking to Cassie, and then all of a sudden she'd go and do something else.
Drawing something while I'm talking to him.
And we ended up watching this video on how men's and women's brain work, and we ended up talking and sharing with each other our experiences. And now Cassie knows that I focus on one thing at a time, and if she's trying to get my attention and I'm focused on something else, that doesn't mean I'm ignoring her.
That just means I have to be patient. Say, hey Ben, when you have a moment, can I have your attention? And then 10 seconds later, then he has his attention on me.
And I know that if Cassie's drawing while I'm talking to her, she's still focused on me because she can multitask. So we were able to share that information with each other, and it helped us understand each other better.
Aww.
Now we're talking about the emotional pillar of the relationship. Your boyfriend-girlfriend is not your emotional crutch.
I just want to tell you my whole heart. Just bear all my emotions. Listen to me.
That doesn't mean you should be stone cold and not share anything with them. You should be sharing how you're feeling. Emotions are important. They've been given to us for a purpose. But their purpose is not for me to have Cassie solve all of my problems.
I should not be the first person and the only person he goes to with whatever emotion or whatever dilemma he's facing in his life.
Cassie, if you're having a bad day and you aren't feeling good, what's a bad way to deal with that? And then what's a good way to deal with that?
So a bad way to deal with it would to think, I'm feeling really bad today, but Ben makes me happy. And so, I'm going to go straight to Ben, and I'm going to expect him to fill that hole in my heart, and I'm going to expect him to make me happy.
And the problem with this is I start feeling responsible for Cassie's emotions. What is a good base?
So, Jesus.
Yay!
God is infinite, and he can fill that infinite size hole in your heart. God is the anchor that I ground my emotions in. No offense, Ben, but humans are horrible emotional anchors, because we humans are changing all the time. But God is constant, and God is the one that can fill you.
We should be going to God with our emotions, right? As our base. But does that mean we should just sit stone cold and never share with each other?
No, it doesn't mean we shouldn't share emotions at all. Emotioning is one of the 4 pillars, which means that you should be sharing emotions with each other. Should you share your entire heart with the other person? Not yet. Let it grow gradually. Your heart is beautiful and precious. You should guard it and let it come out over time.
Aww.
But that doesn't mean I can't tell him anything. So I can tell him my emotions. I can tell him, Ben, I'm having a really bad day. Can I have a hug? And maybe I can ask, hey Ben, do you have any suggestions with this? Do you have any advice? But he's not the one I'm anchored in. God's the one I'm anchored in. The 4th pillar, spiritual. The spiritual pillar. So a lot of people might think, once I find the guy I'm going to marry, then I'll start a prayer life. That's backwards. Your priority should be building up your prayer life and your foundation with Christ first. And from that, allowing him to lead you to the religious order he wants you to join, or like the seminary, or the person he wants you to marry. Within dating, you should still be growing your spiritual life with God. It's not, I found somebody to date, I guess I don't need God anymore. Wrong. Actually, it's kind of like a triangle. So if we have me at this corner, Ben at this corner, and then God up here, if we're both going towards God, we're getting closer and closer to each other. With having a spiritual life, people tend to go to two extremes. Some people tend to be, I need to share everything in all my spiritual life with this person. Or they go to the other extreme of, this is my prayer life, like you can't touch it, you can't see it. Nope, this is my thing with God. Let's meet in the middle.
It's a really good idea to share different things with each other as you're dating, as long as you're focused on building your relationship with Christ. We just prayed a novena together about surrendering ourselves individually toward God.
I surrender! Woo!
So at the same time, we have to pray together while giving ourselves up toward whatever Jesus wants, whether that's us together or not.
Since God is the priority of both of your lives, it should also be the priority of the relationship. And so we should both be aiming to be able to do God's will. In dating, in possible marriage one day, and maybe I go off to religious life and he goes off to become a priest. God should be the first we should go to ask him about the big decisions. So that's the 4 pillars. They should all be pretty even. I'm sure you've seen relationships in your lives where like they have 2 of the pillars but none of the others. They have like 1 of them and none of the others. And usually they don't turn out too good.
Relationships lived in self-gift to each other, and where you're building all 4 of those pillars, the spiritual, the emotional, the intellectual, and the physical, can be really beautiful and really fun.
So dating Ben has not been boring at all. It's actually been a lot of fun and wholesome.
Dating Cassie has been an awesome experience. It's been one of the most fun times I've had.
And I love dating Ben. Aww.
Aww. We need all the prayers you can get, so please pray for both of us, and we'll be praying for you too.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Do you have hand sanitizer on you? Or do you just enjoy being within 6 feet of me?
You're hilarious. Hey, my name is Will. God's will.
We're the Team Marquette for Totus to us. Gonna learn about Christ, so come and join us. Totus Tuus is made possible by Legacy of Faith. Thank you.